And we're on episode 39. It took Nolan Johnson, he's months away from being on the camera and years away from being on the mic. But Nolan Johnson does our social media. Big shout out, does our video stuff. Love the kid. Moved here from California, trying to figure out why. But we'll keep him around. So anyways, we got episode 39 here today with Riley Tincher. And I got to stop before we go to Riley and say we also have the bull with us.
Feels good to be back. Hey, Dave, no one can replace you unless their name was Steve.
So we got Steve McGuigan, Riley, and Steve and Riley played we'll talk about that, played in an all-star game in 2010 in the Northwoods League, which the Northwoods League is what brought Steve and I together. Steve's the owner of Minnesota MASH, which started in 2012, incubated MindStrong project in 2015. Steve brought me lots of stories. No one really cares about that part of it. But happy to have Riley here for episode 39. Riley, it's been a long time coming, brother. We've been trying to get this thing rolling, and it's finally cool to get you on this and get it rolling. So how you doing today, my man?
I am doing great. I've really looked forward to being here, and now the fact that it's just an added bonus with the Steve McGuigan on the podcast with me.
I miss being on this show.
And this is going to make for a great episode. Truly a great episode. So thank you guys for having me on.
Absolutely,
I really
man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for people who kind of comprehend what we're doing, what's cool, and we can get into it as well, but sports is, and we talked about it before we press play, it's a platform really to, build relationships, create stories, kind of build your character. I know you do a lot of mentorship. You're currently down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but the guy's from Wisconsin originally. Steve's nervous, so he's coughing while I'm speaking here.
Sorry, guys. Oh, man.
But what's great about sports and what's great about the opportunity of the three of us, we obviously, you and I played against each other without probably realizing it. And 8 years later, we're here on a podcast. We're up in Minnesota. You're down in Oklahoma. You and Steve had a day or two together playing in that All-Star game. Which Steve, I know, will want people to hear about that a little bit. So you can touch on that too. But what's the coolest thing about stuff like this, and you kind of share this with kids that are going through the system, is sports is a platform to bring you to people, and to enhance mentality and characteristics and leadership. So before I kind of ask you about your journey in your baseball career, and we'll tie it all in and people will see that, I just wanted to mention how cool that is, that all of us probably had no idea in 2009 that we would even know each other, and then kind of putting on different uniforms, playing against each other in a summer league when we're in college, and who would have thought 8 years later we'd be on a podcast? So I think life is weird, and I love the weirdness of it. So I just wanted to mention that before we dive in.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just got goosebumps hearing all that. That's amazing. That's truly amazing.
It's awesome, man. So take us through it. You're from Wisconsin. Go through the story.
Born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, a little suburb called Oregon. We didn't want to be known as Oregon, like the state. We wanted to be different, so we wanted to call ourselves Oregon, even though it's just spelled the same way. I have no idea why, but let's just go with that. I didn't start playing baseball until I was in 8th grade, and to say that my first impression of baseball was awful would be an understatement. Mainly because I was absolutely terrible. I'm talking like going over the entire season terrible. Not even getting a hit, not even making contact with the baseball. Striking out every single at bat, terrible. Trying to be a left-handed catcher, terrible.
Who set you up for this? Who was your coach?
Well, we'll get more into that later. Because the problem was, I knew I was terrible, but I wasn't the only one. My teammates knew I was terrible. Definitely the opposing team knew I was terrible. My parents knew I was terrible.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
And unfortunately, my coach knew I was terrible. He believed it so much that he actually felt the need to lie to me and my parents about practice and game times just so I wouldn't show up.
What?
Yeah. And at the end of the season, after we broke out of the huddle together for the last time, he took me aside and put his arm around me like a loving, caring coach does. Yeah. And he tells me 3 words that stuck with me the rest of my career and created the biggest chip on my shoulder.
Oh, let's go.
And those 3 words were, "You should quit." And he followed that up with, because I don't believe you have a future in baseball.
Wow.
And unknowingly, he became your most beneficial coach of all time.
Best thing that probably ever happened to you.
It's funny because you say that, and it's just like I had so much bitterness and resentment towards him. But truly, what he did to me and the awful things he said to me motivated me for the rest of my career. And again, like I said, I carried this chip with me until my career ended. But at that moment, at 14 years old, I had to make a very serious decision. Do I listen to this coach who I desperately sought the approval of? And I've never met an athlete who doesn't seek the approval of their coach. Or do I listen to myself and my own intuition and my own passion for baseball and continue to follow it and continue to play it? And mind you, I also had other people telling me to quit, including my parents.
Right.
But for some reason, I kept going. And the next year, I was blessed to play for who I believe is the greatest baseball coach in all of baseball, Coach Darren Everson. He was my high school baseball coach, but he's now the minor league hitting coordinator for the Colorado Rockies.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
And he'll be in a major league uniform within the next year or so. I guarantee that.
Thank God you didn't quit.
Yeah,
you ended up getting a professional hitting coach for your high school. That is awesome.
Man. We ran our high school program like an elite college team. Like, we had practice uniforms, like we had standards. Everything was to a T. I'm serious. Like, when I say he's the greatest coach, I truly mean it. And why I believe he's the greatest is because, he believed in me more than I believed in myself. And he demanded more from me than I demanded from myself. He was hard on me because he deeply cared about me, and we all knew that. And most importantly, he pulled out of me who I was meant to become, which I think is the greatest responsibility any coach could ever have.
Right.
We as coaches like to throw this word around a lot, and that word is potential. But the truth is, we don't really know what potential is. Mm. If you were to tell me at 14 years old, a chubby, unathletic, uncoordinated, left-handed kid trying to be a catcher, that he would later on become an All-American and an All-Star in the Northwoods League, I would tell him that you're a liar. But that's exactly what Coach Everson pulled out of me. And he lovingly took me aside like my 8th grade coach did and said, "Hey, we're not gonna be a catcher anymore. Let's turn you into a pitcher." And despite walking every single hitter I faced my first outing, I think I gave up 10 runs. He didn't allow me to quit, even though I desperately wanted to. Instead, he continued to give me chance after chance after chance after chance until I finally made the varsity roster my junior year.
Wow.
And you would think that, after receiving all of these chances, that I would take advantage of it. I was named the number 2 starter. I didn't pitch opening day. I pitched the next one. And my first varsity start was very much like my first start ever. I walked every single hitter I faced. Didn't get an out.
How many was it?
When I was pulled from the game, I was walking back to the dugout with my head hanging down. I look up, and guess who's there? My 8th grade coach.
No way.
Yeah, his son was also on the team.
Oh,
and
wow.
I got back to the dugout, put a towel over my head, just start crying.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I should have listened to my 8th grade coach. I should have quit. And then we get on the bus and head back to the high school, and I'm thinking, this is it. This is the end of my career. I wasted a whole lot of time, and I should have listened to everyone telling me to quit. And when we got back to the high school, Coach Everson had me stay behind. And I thought, oh, great. Now he's going to punish me. And that's not what he did. Instead, he took me to the field house, and he had me throw a bullpen, since I only threw about 35, 40 pitches that day. And during the bullpen, before it started, he took me aside and said, "Riley, watching you pitch today was like watching paint dry." And I laughed, and he said, I timed you in between pitches, and you took so long. One time you actually took a full minute to pitch the next pitch. And the more time you took, the worse you got, because you were overthinking. So this whole bullpen, we're just going to throw fastballs, but we're going to pick up the pace. And I'm going to try to get you to not think while you're throwing. And after every single pitch that bullpen, he was behind me yelling, again, kind of like Coach Herb Brooks in Miracle. It was very much like that.
Yeah.
And after the bullpen was over, he took me aside as we were walking out of the field house. He put his arm around me just like my 8th grade coach did. And he said, Riley, I'm going to give you another chance this weekend. And I want you to start the second game of the doubleheader. And I want you to pitch the same way you just pitched that bullpen. In the same way your teammates and I believe that you can pitch. No, those are strong words for a 16-year-old kid.
Oh, yeah.
Those are strong words for anyone to hear.
Right.
And the next game, I get ready to start, and I get up on the mound, and I throw strike one. And out of the bullpen, or out of the dugout, comes this booming, thunderous voice. Coach Everson is a huge bear-like man with big old bear paws. He's like 6'4", 300 pounds. He's a big man. And out of this dugout comes this thunderous voice yelling, "Get back up there!" And I was in shock, so I hurried back onto the mound, and I threw strike two. And again, out of the dugout came this big, booming, thunderous voice, "Get back up there!" So I got back up on the mound again, threw strike three, and after they threw it around the infield, he yells it again, "Get back up there!" And he continued to yell it after every single pitch I threw that day, which was well over 100. And the funny thing was, I wasn't the only one rushing to get to the next pitch. Towards the end of the game, the hitters on the other team were actually running up to home plate just so he wouldn't yell at them, which was hilarious. But what happened was, the week before that, literally just a few days before that, I couldn't get an out.
Right.
And this next game, I actually broke the school record in strikeouts in a single game. And that just goes to show you that it's amazing what can happen to somebody when they have a leader who believes in them more than they believe in themselves.
When it comes back to potential, you have to have patience. So potential and patience go hand in hand. So what he demonstrated there was the fact that if you believe in someone, it's not going to happen overnight, right? He gave you that opportunity, and people are so result-oriented. To have a coach, especially at an impressionable age, that could see your potential and have the patience to allow you to fail is literally what makes you not only be able to tell that story for the rest of your life, but tell it so passionately.
Yeah. Yep, you're 100% right. And the thing about it is, I actually had a conversation with him a few months ago, and I asked him, why did you continue to give me chance after chance? And he just humbly said, one of the first things I learned as a coach is you always give lefties chances. And I was just like, really? I was thinking there's going to be this big emotional, story about how much he believed in me and loved me and cared for me, and then he just goes, no, you always just give lefties chances.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, so how? Go ahead.
But I just want to say, because of his relentless belief and patience, as you say, Steve, in me, I later that next year received a scholarship to play in college, even though I was told 4 years prior to that I should quit. And then later on, I led the entire NCAA in victories. I was an All-American Pitcher of the Year and All-Star in the Northwoods League with Steve McGuigan. And it was because of his relentless belief in me.
So how much did that? Yeah, there we got 13 minutes, and Steve got a shout out. There you go, Stevie. So how much of that carried weight through? Obviously, it still carries weight into now, and it probably carries a weight into you in terms of life. But how much did you both those sides of the coin, the belief and the lack of belief? How much of that lived internally in your head while you were in college? Did you go back to that often? Both sides.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%. That's such a great question, Harvey. Honestly, after every single bad outing I had, the words of "you should quit" were ringing in my head. Again, I carried this huge chip on my shoulder, and this chip on my shoulder turned into wanting to impress everyone and wanting to prove everyone wrong, and it resulted in bitterness, and eventually resulted in identity crisis at the end of my career, which we'll talk about that later.
Oh yeah.
But on the other hand of that, you know who texted me or called me after every single outing I had? Coach Everson.
Skip.
I'm talking all 5 years of my college career. So every single starter appearance I had.
Was that common? I mean, is that common for everybody that he was around?
I don't think so.
So you and him had a really good relationship.
Oh yeah. I mean, my senior year, I was his teaching assistant for his gym class.
Okay.
So I was down in the gym 6 out of the 9 day, either because I had a gym class or I was down hanging out with him.
I was going to say that involved a little senior slide as well.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. But we got attached at the hip, and unfortunately, he actually left before my senior season started.
Okay.
He got offered a managerial role with the Florida Marlins. I think it was rookie ball. He actually coached Giancarlo Stanton in his rookie season, and I remember actually going to camps and working camps with him, and he would show videos of Giancarlo Stanton, known as Mike Stanton at the time, in rookie ball, and he would show a video of him, what he would proclaim to be the longest home run he's ever seen hit. And he would show this video over and over again in the camps, and then he would circle this kid in the crowd who was watching this game, and he would circle him and he'd go, "Watch this kid." And you literally see Stanton hit the ball, and this kid drops his glass that he's holding in his hand.
Just freaks out.
Yeah. But and he would always say, look out for this guy in the big leagues. He's going to be something special. So again, I think that's just kind of who he is. I think that's what he's gifted in, is the gift of encouragement and seeing, potential in his athletes that they might not see yet. So I think that's just a part of who he is. And, like you just asked, I think I had a really great relationship with him. And, I think he also knew what was kind of going on in my household at the time. I didn't grow up in a very great environment. Both of my parents were alcoholics, battled with depression, and I think he knew that. So he kind of took me in as one of his own and took care of me.
And that's got that's awesome, dude. And that's got to play. I mean, this is obviously, I feel like this is an obvious question or answer, but I mean, to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now. Actually, I'll keep the question because you're obviously doing mentorship and leadership now, and just listening to that short piece. Now you just summed up years of your life in 20 minutes, and you painted a beautiful picture. I mean, it's very, I had goosebumps multiple times during that story. So that's, you've obviously lived that so passionately that you can rattle that off so amazingly. But, you're doing now mentorship and leadership, and that has to have a huge part of your background. And probably motivates you to do what you're doing. But go into kind of what you're doing right now as a career.
So I am a mental conditioning coach, which is just another term for sports psychologist.
Right.
I own a mentorship program called Coachability. And really the theme of my adult life has been create what you wish existed, be what you never had, and give what you've always longed for. Mm-hmm. And, this mentorship program is the mentorship program that I wish I would have had back when I was playing.
Yep. It's crazy how that works out, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I'm often thinking about, I also speak, and I've had the chance of going and speaking to, a couple college or coaches conferences, and I talk to them about this story of, the different sides of the coin between my 8th grade coach and Coach Everson. And I always tell them, don't be my 8th grade coach. It's not your job to determine your athlete's future.
Right.
It's your job to pull out of them who they are meant to become. And that's exactly what Coach Everson said. So I always say, don't be my 8th grade coach, be Coach Everson. Because here's the thing. The other powerful thing behind all of these stories is that coaches, your athletes are going to remember you for the rest of their lives.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to be remembered?
Yeah.
Do you want to be remembered like I remember my 8th grade coach, or do you want to be remembered like I remember Coach Everson?
Think of how impressionable we are at a young age. Look what you're doing for a living now, based pretty much off a conversation with one coach. You've made it your life's mission to help people and not have people go through a situation that you went through for 15 seconds? That's how long that stuck with you.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point.
I mean, literally. Yeah. And it makes me think, what have I said to some of our kids?
Oh, yeah, I've been doing that this whole time.
We can't even begin to comprehend the power of our words, but we've all felt it. We've all felt the power behind them. if I were to ask anyone who's listening, or you, Harvey, or you, Steve, what's the worst thing someone's ever said to you? You could think of it like that instantly.
Oh yeah, I know. I had the exact same conversation. I was just a little bit older. If I was a junior in high school or sophomore in high school when I had mine, you should quit talk from the coach. But it's crazy. So let me ask you this: in terms of mentorship or leadership coaching, I think, and obviously the three of us are now coaching, but if you coach for 40 years, you come and encountered thousands of people, right? And that's thousands of personalities. Every single person has had thousands of different backgrounds, and you're not going to connect. And it's like Coach Everson, like you connected with him. He might not have connected like that with every single player or coach. Doesn't mean he's not a phenomenal coach. He obviously is. But, what is some of the things that you would tell us or coach or give some piece of advice of, maybe I got to say how it is. Maybe I don't like this kid as much as I like this other person. You know what I mean? But that's life, right? And you don't have to like everybody. And there's going to be
people do play favorites.
Yeah, there is a piece of that. But how do you either one, create the awareness to know my job is to care for this person, or maybe if I don't want to care for this person, but I've made it my mission to serve. How are some ways that you've found to kind of get over that or build an awareness to continue to lead in the best way possible for anyone that's in front of you?
Right. That's a wonderful question, and that shows your servant heart, Harvey. And that's the answer. Really, serve. Mm-hmm. We don't get the choice. Right. To choose who we love and serve. We don't get that choice, but we get to choose how we do it.
Yeah.
And it's natural for us to play favorites. It's natural for us to attach ourselves to different personalities. It's natural. But the ones that we don't attach to, it doesn't mean that they don't deserve the resources and the gifts that we've been given.
Right.
And it's our responsibility to give that freely. That's why they call it a gift.
Yep.
It's because you give it away, and not just to your favorite athletes.
And that's what, and I love that, because that's what I think you need to hear more of that, and you need to tell yourself that all the time too, because there are tons of times where you kind of got to prepare yourself, maybe if you know a guy's coming in. And there's always one thing that I like to tell people, and I also like to tell myself, is really what you have to reach is common ground try to find common ground with everybody that you coach.
Right.
And by doing that, you've got to learn who it is. You got to learn the person.
Yes.
I listened to a yoga instructor. She had spent like 25 years over in India and did a bunch of spiritual practice. Steve's giving me Steve laughs at me when I get into my yogi sense. But she trained under these monks all the time, and I took her out for breakfast one time, and I asked her. I wanted to know, okay, like I'm very interested. I don't know if I'll spend time in a cave for years and do the whole monk thing, but I would like to learn.
Take some tidbits.
Yeah, I'd like to learn some things that the monks taught you. And something that really stuck with me was she said, "Learn the learner." And it's not that you have to be the same with everybody, because if you try to serve everybody the same, you're going to find times where I don't like this person as much, and I'm not going to give them what they need. And she used to just say, just learn the learner. But the only way to learn the learner is learn where they're at. If this guy, when you're in 8th grade, learns your family background, I'm sure you were searching for your high school coach. You were searching for that person to come in there and grab you and go, here, I'm going to care for you, man. And then all of a sudden, look what he did. You already said it. He pulled it out of you.
Yeah.
I
think deep down inside of all of us, we all want the same things: to love and be loved, to feel significant, to be appreciated, to be understood, not just heard, but understood, to be challenged and supported, and to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. But the greatest of all of that is love. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty easy to love on someone. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't like them, you can still love on them. I know that's kind of an oxymoron.
Right.
But you love them through serving. You love them through listening to them. And like you said, taking the time to get to know them and their story. Deep down, we're a lot more alike than we are different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And until we take the time to actually get to know each other, we'll never ever know that to be true. And I think it's the leader's responsibility, parent or coach, to take the time to get to know their kid, to get to know their athlete, and not force who we want them to be, but actually learning who they are and loving them for who they are and accepting them for who they are, but not allowing them to stay that way.
How much?
I think, again, that starts with love and serving.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Riley, you're so just so well spoken, and it's very clear that this is your passion for a living. So for me, as I listen to you speak, and obviously my passion is coaching and people, you can hear it in my voice right now. We just started fall baseball practices, so every morning God takes my voice, takes it away for a little bit, and about 3 o'clock I get it back.
Miraculously comes back.
But as I'm listening to you, I'm going, okay, like I am having an emotional connection to the company coachability, right? Just through listening to you speak, I can hear your passion. So from my end, within that, with that platform of coachability, what do you do with the kid? How do you take them? What's your setting? Is it small group? Do you like doing one-on-one? What is kind of your bread and butter for coachability?
That's a great question, Steve. I prefer a one-on-one setting, mainly because, there's a few things I tell them before we start. One of them is whatever is said in this room stays in this room. We meet in an office. And it's really kind of like counseling, where we sit down and actually talk with each other. And another one is, the more open and honest you are with me, the more I can help you, the more I can relate to you, the more I can give you resources to help you. And the other one is I am not the source. I am just a resource. And everything that we're going to do is for your benefit, not mine. So it starts with trust, and it's hard to develop that in a small group right away because, especially like I'm not going to just say kids, but we all just want attention. I mean, that's really what we want. And to be able to sit across the table from someone and give them undivided attention, and the power behind saying something like, I've been through what you're going through right now, and this is what I would do, or this is what I did do that worked for me or didn't work for me, and this is what I wish I would have done. That's very powerful, and there's a lot of trust in that. But again, this mentorship program is really just providing them a resource that I wish I had when I was playing. And you guys can attest to this, especially being professional athletes, playing at a very, very high level. There is this illusion that elite athletes, because they're gifted athletically and that they are given tons of money, not necessarily minor league baseball players, but just given tons of money because of this amazing athletic gift and given tons of resources, that there's no possible way that they could have problems. And that's just not true.
And most of them are going through that. And you said the word earlier, it's trust. And when you're in these settings with these people, how crazy is it to see the light go off? Because whether you're a professional athlete, a young athlete, a mother, a father, a brother, and you're trying to figure out your way, and you're in that meeting room, and I know Harv's had it, I've had it, and you realize that moment, this kid trusts me. Because when they first come in there, they're going, what is this guy all about?
Yeah.
What is he trying to get me to do? And when you get him and he realizes, no, dude, this is you. This is your life. This is your platform. And you can go back to that story of you made the decision to do this when everyone told you not to. How powerful is that connection between you and the person you're working with?
Words can't even describe it. Words can't even describe it.
Right.
Trust is a very, very, very important thing to me. Probably the most important thing to me. And I will do nothing to compromise that. And if that means answering phone calls at 3 a.m. or driving 2 hours to see an athlete just because they need somebody to talk to, then I'll do that. And it's because my trust was broken by so many people in my life. And I was very slow to trust for a long time because the most influential people in my life broke that trust countlessly. So again, it's me honestly just providing that trust that I wish I had. Me providing that voice that I wish I would have heard when I was playing. Being that loving, caring voice that says, you're more than an athlete, and there's more to you than what is going on. And you're better than the choices you're making, and you're better than the environment you're in. And that feeling you have of there's got to be more to life than this is true. Mm-hmm. And I'm living proof of that. So just to be able to share that, is amazing. And then for them to finally connect, it is even more amazing. The question I get a lot from coaches is how do I connect more with my athletes? How do I get more buy-in? And I started speaking a few years ago, and I would kind of just come in and share principles of sports psychology and other character development, and it was all great. And I'm a good talker. I think it's a gift I have. I was kind of connecting with the audience, but not really, because I always used to tell myself that it's not about me, it's about the message. And although that is true, the reason why I have a message to share is because of my story of extreme hardship, of extreme heartache, my story and struggles with depression and suicide. This is what made this message to be. So I finally started sharing my story and my struggles with depression and suicide. And I'm telling you, Harvey and Steve, after the speeches that I give, the amount of kids that come up to me and shake my hand and hug me, a complete stranger, and start telling me things that they've never told anyone before, is on one hand incredibly heartbreaking, because it's like I'm the first person to tell them that it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
And that they're not alone in their fight. But on the other hand, I'm glad they're finally hearing it through me. So these coaches again ask, how do I connect? It's through vulnerability. If you want your athletes to take off the masks that they wear constantly and be vulnerable with you and connect with you, you have to connect and be vulnerable with them first. And that's how you honestly connect. That's how you build trust. So again, I'm a complete stranger to these kids, and all of a sudden they're opening up. I mean, if I could show you the messages I have in my inbox, you would be blown away.
Well, genuine care.
Yeah. Well,
right, genuine care. And that's so tough.
It is. And like vulnerability, it's crazy how much we know the answer, but we don't make the choice. And in a lot of people who go through depression or anxiety or suicidal type thoughts or even the action, usually, and you could help us with this, but talking about it openly is what helps, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing. When I started actually talking about it through my speeches, I started healing. Yeah,
you started getting empowered, right?
Yeah.
And that's like, we just talked to John Anderson a while back, the coach for the Gophers, and he had one of the best pieces where he just said, what's crazy, and you already mentioned it, is the elite athletes, especially, but take away elite athletes, just put people in that category, find such a hard time opening up or sharing what they're actually feeling, where like essentially that's the greatest strength. That's like the highest sense of courage, is actually being able to say like, this is where I'm at right now. This is my story. Yeah. This is what I'm thinking. And what's crazy, and so we've obviously podcasted a lot of people at this point, and we've talked to a lot of people, and I hope that continues to grow, because Stevie, Davey, and I, and everyone else with MindStrong, we have a blast doing this. But what I've learned is every person that we've met with or talked with, it does not matter the status that they're at. They could make, you already said it, they could make millions of dollars and be a first-round draft pick, a Major League All-Star. It is crazy how every person has something they wish wasn't happening in their life.
Every single person.
Yes.
And that's so crazy, because we just don't want to believe it. That's actually a part of part of my speech is, again, to go back to professional and elite athletes. I know you took that category away and put people there, but we put these people on pedestals. And we think that they can't have problems because they're just, we idolize them. Mm-hmm. And I share in my messages, I've worked with a former Heisman Trophy winner who reached the pinnacle of college football, who's the best at what he does, and yet he struggles with self-worth and feeling inadequate because he feels like nothing he does is good enough for his father. Mm-hmm. I worked with an all-pro football player who just signed a contract of a lot of money, and he has an entourage of 5 to 10 people around him at all times. He's probably considered an A-list celebrity, but yet he struggles with loneliness because he keeps everybody at arm's length, because he feels like if they knew the real me, if they knew what I was really struggling with, they wouldn't love me anymore.
Everyone wants to be loved. You kind of circle back to that every time.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
I'm literally just in my own dome right now, feeling sad.
I could tell Harvey was done. I could tell if I didn't say anything, I was like, this guy's going to snap out of something here, or we're not going to talk for the next 45 minutes.
Just feeling sad,
it's really sad. Comparison is truly the thief of all joy. One of the things we're talking about, vulnerability. I know it's incredibly hard, but it's absolutely necessary. Right. And vulnerability is the only way that we're going to have deep, meaningful relationships, the things that actually matter in our life. And I work with a local college here in Oklahoma, women's basketball team, and we do something called Real Talk, where I bring all of the athletes into a room and I ask them a hard question, like, what are you afraid of the most? Like, what is a secret that you haven't told anybody? What are you struggling with right now that you don't know how to ask for help? And we don't leave the room until everybody has answered honestly. And we do this several times. We only answer one question, and sometimes it takes 20 minutes, sometimes it takes 2 hours. But we answer one question. And I remember one time working with this team, it became very obvious that the whole team was upset at the point guard, because whenever they lost, but she scored, I think it was 12 points. I think that was the threshold. If she scored 12 points, then she would act super happy and joyful, like they just won the game, even though they just lost.
Yeah.
And if they lost, or if they won, and she didn't score 12 points, she would act like they just lost. And this really made the team upset. So we created a safe environment for them to call her out and to safely correct her in her actions. And one of the rules is you're not allowed to talk until the one person is done talking. And we go around the room in a circle, and finally when it's your turn, you talk. And this girl just sat there patiently while everybody just added on top of her and ridiculed her. And finally she opened up and said, the reason why I get very excited when I score 12 points is because if I don't score 12 points, my dad won't talk to me.
You got to the root.
And we're just like, wow. The whole room starts crying. Everybody hugs her. And at that moment, the head coach and I realize what it is, like you said, the root of her problem. Who is she trying to impress? Which is her father. And then realizing that she is more than who her father says she is, and that her value is not in her performance. So now we get to pour truth into her and encourage her and counsel her through this. And hopefully this will lead to greater relationship with her father later on, but more importantly, a greater relationship with herself later on, so that she doesn't have to tie her value and her worth into her performance.
Well, and so I know you asked beforehand, before we press play, a little bit about what we do, and I'm sure you touch on this a lot, but I know in sports psychology, the number one ingredient is truly self-awareness and getting to a place of having that awareness of understanding, right? Where you get where identity crisis kind of comes into is you don't have enough self-awareness to know yourself or be able to be comfortable with yourself or enjoy yourself, to where you put identity everywhere else. Where now all of a sudden identity goes to, my identity is only worthy if I score 12 plus points and Pops is happy with me. And there's no awareness there, which obviously you just broke down a beautiful story in terms of you got to the root of that. And that's something that we always have to be evolving. We always have to be asking ourselves questions, and we have to put ourselves out into vulnerable states, because when you're vulnerable, you learn, and that's what's beautiful about it. Is it's like, you hear all the time, it's win or learn. It's not win or loss. It's win or learn, win or learn, win or learn. And that's not just the scoreboard. That is legitimately everything. And Steve and I'm going to put him on blast here for a second. But before this morning, Steve and I we're best buds. We've been that way since we were teammates in 2010. And we worked together, and I think a lot of people early on used to bash us all the time, because not bash, but they would say, you can't work with your best friend. You can't work with your best friend. And for as much as him and I can have a blast together, there's tons of times where we have to have that locker room talk that you just talked about. And I think
Yep.
when you have, for one, self-awareness to even know, like, hey, this person loves me, so now I need to hear what they're saying. You know what I mean? I need to listen to what they're saying, and I need to hear it, and then I need to be vulnerable enough to accept it. Because if you don't allow that, if this girl didn't allow herself to be vulnerable enough to let the team just let her know, like, hey, we're here for you, you don't get there. You don't get there.
Right.
And did that team win 75 games in a row after that, or what happened?
No.
Well, I want to dive into something that you were talking about a bit, is that self-identity, right? And I know when I was done playing sports, I 100% went through that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and everyone goes through it at a different clip and a different rate and a different amount of time. And at MASH, we have tons of players who come through and go through that process, and you have to witness it. So for anyone who's listening, that's such a great piece for you to say and talk about the fact that you make your own choices. And most of the time, people don't identify you as an athlete. When I was playing with Harvey, he probably thought I liked him because he was really good at pitching. I just liked Harvey.
Yeah.
I didn't care at all if he continued to play baseball. And I know my parents didn't care at all, but I sure as heck thought they did.
Yeah.
Did you know that, Harvey?
I think at the time you look at it and you go, and I think culturally we do gravitate towards the best athletes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at the time, like when Steve and I played together, I mean, I was really good.
We were the best players.
Yeah, we were really good. You know, and I was the same way, but you don't necessarily agree with that in your own mind. You know what I mean? You look at it as, if we win, I score 12 plus. If we win and I shut out the side, because because everything around you amplifies when you have success. From everything. You know, I always tell professional athletes that are my good buddies now, I tell them this all the time just to keep them in awareness. I say, look, you're on this platform now where everyone's going to give you their A game. You know what I mean? If I'm with my buddy who's in the NFL and we're having dinner, people stop by to say hi to you. You know, they give you their A game. That's their A game right there. When they talk to me, they go, what's up, dude? What's your name?
What up, Harv?
Yeah, what's up, man? Hey, cool. Yeah, cool. When do you play next week? Oh, you guys are on Sunday against the Ravens? Tight. But the point is, like, that's false reality. Like, it's false reality that also gets stripped from your identity. And I would be, because Steve's right, we see a lot of athletes that go through it, and especially as we get older, you see younger athletes that you kind of watch them grow, and it's scary because you'll watch them start putting their identity in the sport and that platform. Yes. But can you kind of touch on, for your story, a little bit of what you did, what you kind of overcame?
Yeah. So we're going to get real deep here.
Go ahead, man. Peel in.
You know, you actually touched on it perfectly when you said, you know, people are going to give you their A game. I was coming back from one of the best, it was my senior year, I was coming back from one of the best, you know, if not the best season of my career. Again, I led the entire NCAA in victories. I was an All-American Pitcher of the Year. I was an All-Star with the Steve McGuigan in his hometown of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where he was a local celebrity.
He was,
I mean, it was just incredible. And I would walk around Whitewater and I'd be like, did you know that I played with Steve McGuigan? Did you know that?
That's not fabricated either. It truly was weird how much people have made this guy a celebrity.
Oh my gosh, him and Drew Hightoff.
It was insane.
Like, seriously. As soon as their name was announced in the stadium, the whole place erupted.
The city erupted, even if they weren't at the game.
We're going to have you back on the podcast a couple times.
Even more than Harmon Killebrew throwing out the first pitch. Yeah, that's Harmon. I want to hear more about Steve. Steve McGuigan, woo! You know.
You're going to get a lot of coachability plugs on my Instagram coming up here. I'll tell you that.
No, but really, all jokes aside, I actually went back to my senior year and. Talking about people giving you their A game, I was the face on every poster at Whitewater. Everybody knew who I was, especially girls. And it just added to this persona and this caricature of being this perfect person. And I put a mask on, and I tried my best. I put a ton of pressure on myself to repeat the performance I had the year before, and then also be the captain of the team and lead this team to a national championship. And this pressure nearly crushed me. And at the time, I was living in an apartment by myself, and this pressure and isolation turned into depression. And this depression eventually turned into suicidal thoughts. And I remember the first day of winter break, I was driving home to the house I grew up in Oregon, Wisconsin. And it was late at night, probably around midnight, and suicidal thoughts took over. I thought, if I just drive my car into a tree, or if I pull my car out in front of a semi-truck, all of this could end. All of this pain, all of this pressure I was feeling will all be over. And I decided to follow through with it. And I sat at the intersection of Highway 26 and County Road N, just outside of Whitewater. And I sat at a stop sign for what felt like an eternity, waiting for a semi-truck to come. And when one finally did, I closed my eyes, I gripped tight onto the steering wheel, said a prayer, and I let off the brakes, and I rolled out into the highway. And what felt like an eternity after that, I realized I didn't get hit. I opened my eyes and I looked to my left where the semi-truck was coming from, and he stopped about 20 yards away from me. And he was honking his horn at me. And I felt so embarrassed. And I peeled off the highway, and I never told anyone about this. And I carried this around with me for the rest of my senior year. And again, wearing this mask. And I was thinking, I can't tell anyone about this because I'm the All-American. I'm the pitcher of the year. I'm the All-Star. I'm the captain of the team. I'm the one everyone looks up to. I can't let them know that I'm weak. I can't let them know that I'm struggling. But under this mask, I was screaming for help. And by ignoring this problem, it didn't get better, it got worse. Especially when my escape, my identity, baseball, was over. I dedicated my whole adult life, or my young adult life, from high school on to becoming a professional baseball player, and that didn't happen. And it crushed me, and it nearly killed me. I wish I could say that was the first time I tried to commit suicide, but actually I tried taking my life 2 more times after that. And the third time, I planned it all out. I thought, I'm going to schedule the day I'm going to do it. I know how I'm going to do it. I even wrote a suicide note. And on the day, I said all my goodbyes. And on the day I planned on killing myself, I got a phone call from a mentor of mine whom I hadn't heard from in a long time. And I answered thinking that it would be the last time I would ever talk to him. And thank God I answered, because he saved my life. He refused to accept my answer of "I'm fine" when he asked me how I was doing. He kept asking, "No, really, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing?" Until I finally told him that I was planning on committing suicide that day. And he stayed on the phone with me until I promised that I wouldn't go through with it. And then he called me every hour on the hour for the next 5 days. I'm talking about even in the middle of the night, just to make sure that I was okay. And in these several phone conversations, he encouraged me. He spoke truth over me. And he told me things that I've never heard before. And he counseled me. And, he told me something that would eventually radically change my entire life. And that was, Riley, we don't go through what we go through for ourselves. We go through what we go through in order to help others who are going to go through the same thing. There is purpose in our pain. Now, at the time, I didn't know what that meant, because I literally felt like I was drowning every single day. I actually heard recently that they compare depression to losing a loved one, or losing a dog that you loved in your childhood. And I can promise you, losing a dog is much easier than going through depression. And, I thought, how dare you say that there's purpose in my pain? You don't know what my pain is like. But out of these conversations, he also encouraged me to write in a journal. And in this journal, I had to write about my entire baseball career, from the start to the very last pitch that I threw. Every little detail of it, every story in it, no matter how humiliating, how embarrassing it is, I had to talk about it all. And as I started writing in this journal, we set out a plan to write 1 page a day for as long as it took, starting at the beginning of the year. And as I was writing, I started healing because I started addressing things that I had suppressed. Because up until that point, I was very bitter towards baseball. I wanted nothing to do with it. It broke my heart. So I just put it aside, hoping it would go away, but it didn't. I actually couldn't go to games. I still have a hard time going to games because I don't want to know what it's like to sit on the other side of the fence. And let's be honest, I don't like sitting next to people who I tried so hard to ignore my entire baseball career. You know what I mean? Because let's be honest, they have no idea what they're talking about. But anyway.
Oh no, you're right. You're right.
Funny story. Little side note here.
Yeah,
I was playing in Madison, Wisconsin, against the Mallards. Mind you, this is my hometown, and Steve, you know, and Harvey, you know what it's like to play in Madison. It's a circus.
It's a gong show.
It's a circus. Music is playing all of the time. The only time it's not playing is when the ball is released from your hand until it hits the glove, and as soon as it hits the glove, music's back on, and beer is flowing. Everybody's drunk. It's crazy.
There's thousands of people there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the max capacity is like 10,000 people, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, if you're a visitor, your bullpen is right next to the duck blind. And the duck blind is an all-you-can-eat and drink venue, which is just nuts. And, you know, they open the gates early. People are there. So by the time game time comes or by the time it comes to start warming up for the game, people are already drunk. And I'm in the bullpen, and they had little cups of like Pepsi cups with logos. And there's a guy behind me, and he yells, "Hey, 38," that was my number. "Hey, 38, that better be Diet Pepsi in there." You know, making a fat joke. And I turn around, and, you know, he's turned into his buddy's high five, and yeah, we got him. And I actually just took my water cup, and I poured it on him. I splashed it on him, and then went about my bullpen. And sure enough, at the end of the game, you know how we line up for autographs at the end of the game?
Yeah.
This fool comes up to the autograph line with a baseball and says to me, "Can you sign my baseball?" Because luckily I pitched really great that day, got the win. Actually got a standing ovation because they announced that I was a hometown kid, which was amazing. But he comes up to me with a baseball and asked me to sign it, and I literally signed it, Diet Pepsi drinker. And I give it back to him, and the look on his face when he saw that, it was just one of the highlights of my career. But it just goes to show you that whatever people say is just a reflection. It's a reflection of their own hurt, what they've been told their whole life, and what they believe to be true. So when people attack us, it's because they're hurting, and they're looking for ways to make up for that hurt. But anyway, that's just a side note.
Well,
but back to the story. Sorry, you can go ahead, Steve, if you want to say something.
No, I was just I want you to finish because I can say what I can say when you're done. You keep going.
Okay. But as I started, back to the journal, as I started writing, I mean, there were days where I couldn't even see the laptop in front of me because I'm crying. But I wrote a page a day. And as I got closer to the end of writing and I got closer to the end of my career in my journal, I started meeting more and more athletes who were also struggling with the same things. Identity crisis, depression, not knowing what to do with life after sports. And some of the stories I heard were so heartbreaking. Stories of substance abuse, depression, suicide. And I became very discontented by it. And I thought, you know, somebody's got to do something about this. This is a serious problem, and nobody is addressing it. And I remember telling my mentor this, the one who saved my life, and he starts laughing at me. And he says, "Riley, you remember one of the first conversations we had where I told you there's purpose in your pain and that we don't go through what we go through for ourselves, we go through it to help others who are going to go through the same thing? Well, this is it. This is your purpose. You're going to be that somebody to do something about this." And that's when my journal turned into my book, Pitching Against Myself. And it was no longer about me anymore. And, you know, before that, he would always text me every morning, "Did you write your page today? Did you write your page today?" But after that, it was Create What You Wish Existed, which is the book, which is a book that I wish I would have been able to read back when I was playing. And as I start finishing this book, I add sections to the end of every chapter called Knowledge Applied. Because to me, wisdom, which is the greatest thing we could ever ask for or receive, is knowledge applied, simply put. And at the end of every chapter in every chapter is a game or a season that I pitch in, and then followed up by this knowledge applied section, which is the life lesson that I learned during that season or game in my life, and how I've applied it to my life after sports, and how the reader can too. And I finished the book, and I put it off, because quite frankly, it scared the hell out of me, because I'm incredibly vulnerable in it. I share stories in it that I've never told anybody about. And quite frankly, I was scared of the magnitude of it. There's that great quote that, it's not that we're afraid that we're inadequate. We're afraid that we are powerful beyond measure. Well, that's what this book means to me. And I can see the impact that it has. So I put it off for years, 2 years to be exact, until I went on vacation to Los Angeles, California. And I met a woman. I was at a crossroads in my life. Do I continue to do what I was doing, which was I was a strength and conditioning coach at the time? Or do I follow this constant pull on my heart to finalize this book and publish it and pursue whatever I believe this impact of this book is? And in our conversation, me and this woman, I start telling her about my baseball career. I start telling her about my story. I start telling her about my struggles with depression and suicide. And she starts crying. And she tells me that I remind her of her son. And that he was a baseball player too. And I said, what's he doing now? She said, well, unfortunately, when he was pitching in the minor leagues, he injured his shoulder. And shortly after, the team he was playing for released him. And that was the end of his career and the end of his life. He decided to end his own life a few weeks later. And he wrote a suicide note. And on this note it said, all I know is baseball. All I am is a baseball player. I don't want to know anything else, and I don't want to be anybody else. And Harvey and Steve, I can tell you that those words, those exact same words, were on my suicide note. And I start crying, and she starts crying, and our conversation ends, and I'm leaving, and we part ways, and she turns back to me, and she says, my son needed to read your book. And that's when I finally made the decision to publish it. So when I got back home, I did just that. And out of this book came speaking engagements, and out of the speaking engagements came my mentorship program.
Well, thank God for you. So, so you guys understand, and we're talking about vulnerability. You got Marty to tears. So Marty's in tears right now, which is when you were saying, go ahead, Steve. I'm also smart enough to know when I should just shut the hell up and let somebody talk. So to hear your story, and you're talking to two guys who pride themselves on making people around them feel great and feel great about themselves. You've just given us that, for us to be able to sit here and listen to you and hear about your story, and most importantly, how you've taken your story and your life and how you've decided to impact others is everything that's right in this world. And I say all the time, there's a lot of good in this world. We need to enhance it. And you're doing that. And for us, we're extremely grateful. MindStrong Project is all about helping people and making sure that we're bettering people, whatever they're doing, wherever they are. But selfishly, we get the opportunity to do that every time that we're on this microphone. And for me, the impression that you've made on me, and obviously I'll speak for Harv, the impression that you've made on Harvey, once you get on our side, we're pretty much all in with you. So
that's awesome.
For your athletes, anyone who listens to this who's been a part of Coachability, just know that from our end, you've made a hell of an impression on us, and we're rooting for you, and we're rooting for your story. And I haven't read an entire book since I read Fig Pudding when I was in 3rd grade, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to pick your book up and read it, man. I'm
awesome.
As a vulnerability part, I'm extremely proud of you. We've never met, but to hear your story, I'm extremely happy for you, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
Those words mean so much to me, Steve. Really. Words can't describe how grateful I am to know you guys, truly, and for this opportunity to share my story.
Marty,
this message that I'm very passionate about.
You back with us, Marty?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Yeah, that was the first podcast I've ever cried on. So,
I'm sorry, Harv. I'm sorry.
No, it's good, man. I just you relive. Obviously, we are fortunate to know a lot of amazing people from the start of this podcast through sports, but you hear stories like that, and I'm reliving buddies and people that I know have shared that. And obviously, I went through a state of depression after my sports. And I don't know, you just got me with that story of the mom, because that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Oh man, you want to talk about? I wept when she told me that, and right then and there, I knew what I needed to do. And here's the thing, my story, that young man's story, are not unique, and it's getting worse. And these athletes who are thinking that their sport defines who they are. They say things like, baseball is life. No, it's not. It's not. It's a gift you've been given, but it's not your life. It's a small percentage of your life, but it's not your life. You are more than a baseball player. And the crazy part about this, I was going to save this for later, but I actually got back home and I finished it, and I went back to edit it. And you know how at the beginning of each chapter, I don't know if it's like this in fig pudding, but at the beginning of each chapter, there's drop caps in most books. And that's like the first letter of each chapter. They're usually big gold letters, like 3 lines long. But I had 20 chapters in my book. And up until that point, I knew what I knew the vision. I knew what I was supposed to do. I believe in a future where every athlete understands that sports do not define who they are. Sports are a platform, not a calling. But I didn't know how I was going to do this. I didn't have the mentorship program at that time. I definitely didn't want to speak at that time. And I just didn't know how. I didn't know what that message was going to be. And I went back and I looked through all of my drop caps. And again, I had 20 chapters. And the 20 drop caps spelled out, I am more than an athlete. And I didn't do that. That's totally divine. And you want to talk about having goosebumps for days after reading that? It left me speechless, kind of like I am right now.
Yeah.
And I wrote a conclusion after that, and in the conclusion, it's you are more than an athlete. You are more than who you believe you are. You are more than what you do. You are more than anything you have done, are doing, and ever will do. And this thing that you call your life doesn't define who you are. And now I get a chance to share this message with athletes. I get a chance to travel and speak and, like I said, share a message that I wish I would have heard back when I was playing baseball. A message that says you are more than an athlete and that this sport doesn't define who you are.
Yeah, man. Amen. I mean, I'm thinking about so many things that you hear while you play till they rip the jersey off your back. This is such a short window and blah, blah, blah. And I think as Steve and I kind of internalize all this stuff, it speaks volumes of, and I'm sure this will be awesome to hear as well. But I mean, we want to take you through the Diamond Series and kind of take it into and just narrow in as you move forward, narrow in, some questions that now obviously you see a lot of your background and you hear the passion, you hear the experiences you've had. So there's obviously a lot of purpose through your pain, but our main objective when we go through the Diamond Series, and it is a baseball diamond, is really using the platform of baseball to build that awareness, build that internal confidence, that self-worth, that ability to feel good and not use the game as you're a baseball player identity, but use the thought process of running on the bases as a constant flow of freedom and love. So when you start at home plate, you have purpose. I'm getting myself back into my zone. I got to be honest with you, Riley. You had me going, man. So that was one of the best stories I think I've ever heard. But going through purpose, We do talk about, 3 best ways that we feel you do find purpose, our identity, not as a baseball player, but as a person. What is your identity as a person? What kind of service or sense of togetherness or love do you find heavy purpose out of? How do you serve others? And then finally, what are you willing to struggle for? You don't have to answer those 3. Just that's kind of the sense of what we try to live in those worlds. But when you get up in the morning and you're narrowing down your purpose and you're hammering that, what is that as you move forward? What is something you remind yourself? What's your why?
I love this Diamond series, by the way. I might steal it from you.
Yeah, no, please do.
Don't you dare.
I'll rename it something else. No, I'm just teasing. I'll definitely give credit where credit's due because I think it's amazing. I think it's truly amazing. And I love that you do it at the end of your podcast. And I was really looking forward to hearing this ever since hearing Coach Dar's Diamond series.
Oh, she'll love that.
Coach John Anderson's.
Yeah.
You want to speak about crying? I cried when I listened to John Anderson speak from his heart.
He was the man.
Having a coach like that, when he said, "I'm setting my athletes up for 50 years from now," it's just like, that's so rare. That is so rare, and it breaks my heart, truly, because, and we'll get into this later, but, coaches, it's been said that coaches have more influence on people in 1 year than normal people will have in their entire life. And I'll take that even further. Coaches have more influence on an athlete, myself included, than that athlete's parents have. So to hear a coach who is more concerned about what their athlete does after they're done playing for them is amazing. Truly amazing. And I cried during that interview. It was really great. I just want to say, Davey, if you're listening right now, I love your passion. You can hear when you're really getting going and John Anderson is firing you up because you can hear your exhales. It's just like you nail it. I love your passion. I love what you guys are doing here. Sorry, back to the question. I hope I made it pretty obvious in this podcast, but I believe it is to remind people that they are more than their circumstance, more than their past, more than their performance, more than who others say they are, and most importantly, more than who they believe they are. And the question I often get is, okay, if sports don't define who we are, what does define us? And I go back to what we talked about earlier. I think deep down we all want the same things. And the main one is love. But in order to love us well, we must be known well. And the problem is we all want to be loved well, but we don't want to be known well. So we wear these masks because we don't want to let people know our secrets. And the problem with that is when people tell us that they love us, we really know that they just love the mask we wear. And that is a serious problem. And I think it's the problem that is becoming an epidemic, which is mental health, which is depression and suicide and anxiety among younger generations. But, the Bible says God is love. The two of them are synonymous. And the reason why he loves us well is because he knows us well. And the reason why he knows us well is he created us well. And it's been said that the only thing that can define a thing is its creator. So I will always point back to my creator. That's what defines us. I am a child of God. I am not a baseball player. And my heavenly Father has called me, equipped me, anointed me, and empowered me to pursue his calling, which is not baseball. So that's really my purpose. So I wake up every single morning, and I know there is someone out there who needs encouragement and who needs a reminder that they are more than what they do and that they are more, period. And I wake up every morning hoping to meet that person. That's what I ask for every single morning. And I am willing to struggle through all the hard conversations and all of the patience that it takes and the trust that it takes to build that. But once I get to that moment that we talked about earlier, where they can finally trust me and open up to me and then realize that aha moment of, wow, I am more than I believe I am, that makes it all worth it.
That's all. I mean, I could listen to this guy. I could listen to Riley talk all day. It's, I'm just internalizing everything. I apologize. I'm taking you down. I got to take you down to first.
Don't apologize. The funny thing is, faith. Faith is such a hard topic to talk about.
Right.
But faith, we learn faith through retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back at my life and everything that I've been through, growing up in an alcoholic and abusive household, filled with neglect and oppression, and struggling through baseball, and struggling with depression, and struggling with suicide, I should not be here right now. I should not be alive. But there was miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle that was worked in my favor to keep me here just so I can have this conversation with you guys today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard not to believe that there's a God there that's working everything together good for me, because I'm called according to his purpose and I love him. And he loves me immeasurably more than I could ever ask for or imagine.
Amen.
So it's amazing. And we especially in sports psychology, there's a term like mental toughness, and some people are called mental toughness coaches. One of the things that I take my young athletes through, especially, is I give them words that are attached to character, that I believe are attached to character, like integrity and perseverance and character and trust and respect and all of these things. And one of the greatest words that I have them define these words on their own, and they usually come back to me with some Google definition, and then I challenge that so that they can make it their own. Okay, what does that mean? Why do you think that is true? What does that mean to you? And one of the greatest words that I have them define is grit. And I think grit is one of the greatest characteristics that we could have besides empathy. And I have a 9-year-old athlete who plays a whole bunch of sports, and we were defining grit one day. And we kind of get to the conclusion, all of a sudden he blurts out that, well, grit, you're telling me grit is the ability to persevere through anything because we have the utmost certainty that everything will work out for our good. And I was left speechless.
Yeah, seriously.
I was like, yeah, that's it. That's it. And in that moment, he proved two things. Wisdom knows no age. And the other one is, the foundation of mental toughness is faith. Knowing that everything will be okay in the end.
Yeah, and that's so peaceful to remind yourself of that. And that's what's been crazy, and that's why I've had so many emotions, and Stevie has too. He just is able to hide them right now. But I guess the emotions of during this hour plus is the fact that it's hard not to believe that this podcast is supposed to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard not to believe that you're supposed to encounter certain situations, and that's what triggered a lot of emotions as you relive and you have. I mean, it's crazy. I was listening to, I can't remember screw up the last name, but Dr. Joe Dispenza. He wrote a book, Placebo, and it's all about emotions and thought, and how emotions are just it's the cause of past experiences, and people who live off past experiences and create an emotion, that's what the mood is, right? So somebody who has a mood for 3 to 4 to 5 days, oh, I'm in a mood, but really what you're doing is you're just continuing to allow this thought to maintain and hold on to your emotion. And then if you do that for years on end, then it turns into a quality of you, and then it turns into a personality trait, which is a depression side of it. And so that's why a lot of these things you hear, you got to have faith. You've got to understand that we were just talking about this to our athletes yesterday. If you live in the past, you're in the guilt. If you live in the future, you're in fear, and right now, if you live in that past, and instead of breaking through that emotion, you'd probably still have tons of guilty emotion. And I think that's what so many athletes go through. And is because you live in so much guilt of the past of what if this happened, or I didn't make my dad happy, or I didn't make it to the show, or I got hurt, or whatever. and you live in so much past. So if you do that for years on end, you have an emotional personality trait that dominates the hardwiring of your brain. And so that's what, like, obviously this podcast is amazing, and listening to your story, because that's what you kind of hope to share and have people hear. And it's the awareness of continue to hardwire your brain to create. And creation is nerve-wracking because you're in the unknown. And that's where, when you're in the unknown, you've got to have faith, because faith is what gives you the energy to keep tackling uncomfortability, and so I love that. So as you kind of go down, man, and take that purpose down to first base, which is your standards, which you talked early in the podcast about choice, but we really talk a lot about, there's stimulus of the day, which feeds into any type of reaction that you have. But in the middle of that, you have the power of choice. So when you get up in the morning, Riley gets going, as a man, to make sure you're in a leadership role. And obviously you got to have people in front of you, because we're always learning too. But what do you do? What are your standards for your life, mentally, physically, spiritually, that kind of keep you in the best world of making the right choices?
I love that. I absolutely love that. I love this because I think we as a society rely way too much on motivations and emotions and feelings, and motivation is fleeting. Yeah. Because it's attached to our emotions, and as you know, our emotions change every single minute, every single hour.
Oh yeah.
Every single moment.
Stevie will tell you I don't believe in motivation. I don't believe it exists.
I hate that. One of the worst things I hate, and I'll actually go into this spiel, is when I'm introduced as a motivational speaker. I hate that, because I'm very much against motivation, because I think we rely on it way too much. So I always say, at the end of this spiel, I say, we never rise to the level of our motivation. We fall to the level of our standards.
Oh, like it.
And our standards are who we are. And to be honest, creating standards is one of the things that I do with my athletes. Something that I've done with myself. Something that has radically changed my life. And I have a ton of them. I actually have 16 of them, and I hang them up every single where I am. Like, I have them up in my bedroom. I have them up in my office at home. I have them up in my office at work. Like, I have them everywhere to remind me to continue to work on it, continue to focus on it, and to continue to be in that moment, like you said earlier. But I mean, I can list them all off.
Yeah.
But you seriously want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, the first one is I make my bed. I make my bed every morning.
Go.
This is a great way to create small, simple disciplines, because I believe small, simple disciplines lead to big victories and momentum in life. And plus, you get to come home and have that sense of accomplishment when you see a made bed already. Second one is I write everything down, and this really started with the journal. Moments can escape us, thoughts can escape us, ideas can escape us. So I carry around a little notebook with me, and whenever something pops up, I write it down right away. So that's a standard of mine. Another one is I sharpen my axe. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by President Abraham Lincoln. He says, if you give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 5 hours sharpening the axe. And that speaks to me volumes about preparation and the value of it. So again, there's a lot of things that are out of our control, but preparation is one of them that's in our control. So I will continue to focus on that for the rest of my life. I grow where I'm planted. That's another one that helps me stay in the moment and not get so focused and fearful of the future and what's ahead, because that's something I struggled with greatly. So I remind myself I grow where I'm planted. I am exactly where I need to be, and I'm around the same people that I need to be around, and I need to find a way to serve these people. Another one is life and death comes out of my mouth. And this just, again, is almost like that restraint moment where I'm about to vent, or I'm about to say something about myself that I used to say years ago. Negative self-talk or just detrimental self-talk, and it catches myself and helps me realize the power of my words. Another one is, what does the Bible say? Again, it's taking it away from my emotions, taking me away from relying on my feelings, and my circumstance and going directly to my source. What does the Bible say about this? And how does it say that I should react to this? Another one is the theme of my life, which is create what you wish existed. I think you guys know what that means. Another one is I have the courage to ask for help. This is another one that is really hard for me sometimes. I think it's hard for a lot of people because, again, vulnerability is tough. And especially as young professionals, we want to make a name for ourselves, and we want to be known, and we want to be known as, consummate professionals and know all the answers and all this other stuff, and pride. It just reminds me that I don't have it all figured out and that I need to ask for help. So it's just a great reminder. Another one is it's not about me. Another one is feeling does not equal being. And this is a great one I teach my athletes. Even though I feel afraid, that does not mean I am afraid. My emotions, my feelings do not dictate my actions. So I may feel afraid, but I'm going to act anyway. Great reminder for me. One that I learned from college was I do not do anything to embarrass myself or my team. I think that goes without explanation. Another one is I always leave everything better than when I arrived. Another one I got from University of Wisconsin-Whitewater from Coach Don Vonlich. Another one is knowledge without application is useless. Again, knowledge applied, wisdom. Another one is that. I'll save that one for later because I want to go more in depth on that. Another one is get there, period. We get so focused on the end destination and we become impatient about it. So it's to me it's a reminder that it's not about getting there as fast as I can. It's just about getting there, period. So get there, period. And then the other one that led to a radical change in my life and my career is who are you trying to impress? For the longest time, I had this giant chip on my shoulder that, again, turned into the need for approval, the need to impress everyone, the need to prove everyone wrong that doubted me. And this almost, this consumed my life. And I was trying so badly to impress scouts, to impress coaches, to impress girls, to impress my parents, to impress my teammates, to impress random strangers like fans and blog writers and newspaper, whatever. And it radically consumed me and it drained me of so much. And I remember meeting with my catcher my first year at Whitewater, and he asked me this question: who are you trying to impress? And he told me, the only person you should be trying to impress is God, and he's already impressed with you. And I've never heard that before. And I'm telling you, it radically changed my life. Radically changed my life. And I was no longer trying to impress everyone. And guess what? Next year was the best year of my career. So hats off to Matt Millar for reminding me of that.
There you go, Matty.
I think that's something we all struggle with.
Right.
We do want to impress people.
Right.
And for people that say, I don't care what people think, they're lying. They're lying. We all care. But it's really just centering ourselves, okay, who am I trying to impress? Okay, I'm a child of God. He created me. He already validated me. He's impressed with me. He's already accepted me. And when I'm trying to impress others, I have to remind myself that they didn't create me and they didn't die for me. So why should I try to impress them? And that's radically changed my life. And that's a whole nother podcast in itself right there. And then the final one, and this is one I want to really talk about, was if I have something good to say, I say it. A lot of times we withhold compliments and we withhold nice things to say to others. I actually heard a parent tell me that you can say I love you too much. I'm just like, no, you can't. You cannot say I love you too much to your kids. Again, our words are so powerful. We can't even begin to comprehend how powerful they are. But we have all felt how powerful they are, like we talked about earlier. And there's an exercise I use with my athletes. And I really wanted to share this for coaches who are listening, for you guys. And I learned this from the Positive Coaches Alliance. And it's this exercise where, you get an athlete who comes in to close out a game and blows the save and the team loses. And the next time you meet with them, you're going to have to talk about this situation. So they're obviously going to come with a negative perspective of it. They're going to be, guilt-ridden, and they're going to feel terrible about themselves, and they're going to beat themselves up. And our job as their coach, as their mentor, as their mental conditioning coach, is to realign their perspectives and realize that one of the greatest things sports teaches us about life is it's never about what happens to us. It's about how we respond to what happens to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started this exercise where, hey, where I say to the athlete, I know you wish you would have gotten that save last night, or I know you wish you would have made that game-winning kick or that game-winning goal or that game-winning shot. I know you wish you would have done that, but you know what I love about you is you're going to bounce back from this. You know what I love about you, fill in the blank. You're the type that to actually have the courage to step up and get on that mound and close out the game for your team. You're the one that, no matter what happens to you, you show how resilient you are and you bounce back. And of course the reaction is, really? You think I am? You think I am that person? And in constantly saying these things to them, again, I'm pulling out of them who they are supposed to become. I'm teaching them a great lesson of how they should respond to this situation. And also, I'm kind of shaping their identity. Because again, like you said earlier, we can get caught up in everything that we've told ourselves in the past. And our words shape who we are. So if we want to help change our athletes' self-dialogue, we need to teach them what they should say. By saying things like, hey, you know what I really love about you? I love that you just opened that door for that old lady. I love that you shared your lunch with your friend because they didn't have a lunch to eat. I love this behavior about you. And watch what happens. Again, what you praise will continue. And if we get so caught up on outcome and, wow, you blew the save, you didn't get the win, you struck out in at bat, you're hitting below 300, it's just going to snowball out of control. Where I want to focus more on the behavior. Because it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. I'm not helping your performance on the field. I'm helping you become who you're supposed to become. And if that helps your performance on the field, great. But if it doesn't and it helps you become the husband you were created to be and the father you were created to be, then that's amazing. But again, I think it starts with we need to talk to our athletes the way they should be talking to themselves.
I like that, and I'll give a little humble brag, another one for Steve, since Steve's had some hot shots. Steve won the Positive Coaching Alliance for the state of Minnesota 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years ago, Stevie won that as a 27-year-old. We got to go to Target Field. I got to reap the benefits of sitting in the suite.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Thank you.
And you know what? And just knowing you from the brief moment I had with you and Drew at the All-Star game, your personality is so infectious, Steve.
Thank you.
It's so infectious, and you just want to be around you more. I left that game wanting to be your teammate, so I can imagine you taking that into coaching. And just the same things that you've said in this podcast. I know I don't want to fill your head even more, but the things that you've said in this podcast, again, like John Anderson, it's rare. Coaches who actually care about their athletes.
Yeah.
Not about who they are as people, not about what they do for you on the field. It's rare. So it's good to have great conversation with you guys who get it and who understand your impact and that it goes far beyond sports.
It's phenomenal, man. And so go with that. Far beyond is our final, going towards vision as you round out the Diamond Series and go on as you kind of think of yourself as a leader in the future and mentorship, but also your company, right? And books, and hopefully you are able to write more in the future. Kind of take this forward. What is your vision here? What's the carrot in front of you? Where you're going? All those standards you named off and the systems you have in place mentally and physically. What is that getting you towards? Where are you going? What excites you?
So are we on third base, or are we on home plate for vision?
Oh no, home plate is purpose. You're going all the way down. You're at third base for vision.
Oh, sorry, third base for vision. So we're not on second. We're not talking about systems.
I think I missed systems. Did I miss systems?
Well, yeah, you kind of you covered your systems, right, in those 16.
Right,
so I think that
right.
I think we kind of got that feel. The good thing about you is that we know where you stand.
Yeah,
you're so well spoken,
Thank you.
It's pretty obvious to see what your systems are and what your focus is. So I think for me especially, I want to hear about your vision, because I know that how is this guy who's driven us, that we've never, we haven't been around for, what is it, 2018, 8 years, drive some guys to tears. What is his vision? How is he going to use that ability moving forward?
I hope I don't let you down. I hope I don't let you down.
Don't you let me down.
But honestly, one of the things I've learned in especially the last 3 years, because the mentorship program is essentially a little less than 2 years old, and I released the book just last year. We're coming up on a year anniversary.
Congratulations.
And I thank you. And I started speaking, relatively recent. And one of the things I've learned is you want to make God laugh, make plans, because it's so often we get caught up in what we want to do and the things that we want to accomplish. But when we get pulled a different direction, we need to be okay with that as well. And I think my vision. I shared this earlier in the podcast, but I just believe in a future where every athlete understands that sports don't define who they are. Sports are a platform, not a calling. And somewhere along the lines, I realized that why are these athletes struggling with identity? Why are they struggling with life after sports? And it hit me. It's because of their influences. It's because of the person who has the most influence on them, which is their coach. So I shifted the dialogue, and it became, not only do I believe in a future where every athlete understands that sports don't define who they are, but I also believe in a future where every coach at every level fully comprehends the power and impact their influence has on all of their athletes. And how I'm going to do that, I have no idea, but God does.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to continue to follow his voice and his guidance. And I'll just continue to do it through speaking, writing books, social media posts, my mentorship program, and being a guest on illustrious podcasts like this with the Steve McGuigan and Harvey Martin. So really, my vision is just go where God wants me to go. That's it.
Love it.
Well, take 1 second to give yourself a plug on your social media thing so that all the listeners can go ahead and follow you on that.
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, all at Riley Tincher, just how you spell my name. Mm-hmm. You can also go to RileyTincher.com. And also, if I'm going to do a shameless plug for my book as well. My book is available on Amazon, but it's also available on RileyTincher.com. And I actually created a discount code for everybody who listens to the MindStrong Project podcast or the Marty and the Fishbowl podcast, I should say. Yeah. And that the discount code is MindStrong20. That's MindStrong20 for 20% off the book.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Riley, I'm going to jump in for a second. I know you've done a lot of talking, a lot of sharing, but I do truthfully want to say thank you, because it's clear that this is your gift. If you've ever had any doubt, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? It is. So thank you for that from my end. And hopefully, in honesty, in my head, I said, well, at some point I'm going to Oklahoma. So that's kind of what's been in my head. We've been lucky to meet. Harv and I have met a lot of people in our lifetime, and heck, they end up usually living here. So at some point, you're probably going to end up living here based off of how well this went.
Well, I definitely need to make it up to Minnesota, because I want to see what you guys are doing at MASH. Because Coach Hergert, Travis Hergert at NIAC, he speaks so highly of you guys. And just a quick plug for Coach Hergert. Talking about great coaches, I shouldn't just include Coach Everson. Coach Hergert is one of them too. Yeah. He actually gave me a scholarship without even watching me pitch, based on just what Coach Everson told him. So that shows you the influence Coach Everson had, but also the trust that Coach Hergert had in me. And you want to know how great of a coach he is? At the day after my career ended, he was one of 2 coaches to text me and tell me how great of a career I had. And he was one of them with Coach Everson. So again, I always tell him, and he's very humble.
Oh yeah,
like he's having a very successful career as the head coach at Nyack for a reason.
Yes,
it's not by chance.
He's got as much passion as you.
Yeah, he's a wild man, dude. He's a wild man.
Oh, dude, he was my pitching coach at the time. Coach Todd Rima, who's now at Kirkwood, was the head coach. So me and Coach Herger and I really interacted really well on a daily basis. I was that annoying kid that always came to his dorm because he was actually, I think he was campus security at the time, and he actually lived in the dorm. He wasn't married yet. And I was the annoying kid that always came to his door asking him, what can I do today to get better? What are these things that, what can I do? Just constantly bugging him. And he never turned me away. He always answered. His care is so rare, and it just exudes out of him. And there's a reason why he's having the success he's having, and there's a reason why his players speak so highly of him.
Right. I actually just talked to Hergert yesterday. I didn't tie 2 and 2 together to tell him that we were going to be podcasting, yes, but I was just talking to him yesterday about getting him on the podcast as well too. So that'll be cool to get him on here, and he usually listens to these as well. I'm sure he'll listen to this one. But from my end, man, I think it's amazing that the fact. First of all, I gotta say thanks for just reaching out to us a few months ago, and then us kind of sticking with each other. There's obviously a reason behind us all getting on the mics and nailing out a podcast. And I probably get redundant here on people hearing me say this all the time, but I do believe this, and I don't like always having the same so long speech of time. But I do believe that the greatest form of leadership is giving away your time, because you can't get that back. So in terms of you setting aside a schedule to talk to Steve and I, in my mind, that's right up the alley of the highest level of leadership that people can give. So from not only sharing your story, and obviously I got my vulnerability now of I was on the tears, which I'm fine with because I think emotions are good.
Yes.
But I appreciate that, man. To share that story. Now our job on the back end is to push this out and get some people. If we get one person to have an enhanced human experience, it was worth the hour and a half or so. So from my end, I'd love to get you up here at some point. I'm sure we will shake hands here in the future. But Riley, dude, that was unbelievable. That was an unbelievable podcast. I'm so thankful, and we're very fortunate to have listened to your story. And again, we will be in touch as we move forward here.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Harvey and Steve, for your time. I know how busy you guys are. You're constantly traveling. You're constantly learning. You're constantly improving. So you guys setting aside a time to do this podcast is really great. And obviously, I'm on a mission. Mm-hmm. And by being on this podcast, you are helping me take one giant step forward to accomplishing that mission. And I just want to say, if you're listening to this right now and you are struggling with identity crisis, depression, suicidal thoughts, please have the courage to ask for help. And for those of you who are not struggling right now, don't put it on other people who are struggling. Don't give them the responsibility to reach out. We need to reach out to them. And that means reaching out to the strong people, the ones who portray like they have it all together, because we all know no one has it all together. So we are the ones that need to reach out, and we are the ones that need to pick each other up. Connection is the only answer. Connection is. Struggles, setbacks, depression, suicide, anxiety are not the problems. Oftentimes they give us, an ability, an opportunity to be strengthened and to learn something from them. So those aren't the problems. Isolation is the problem. And connection is the only way to fix that.
Amen, brother. Very good.
Riley, you're a special dude.
I hope your mission, continue to go on your mission, man. Get in there and keep getting your nails and your hands and your feet dirty.
Yeah. That is the plan. That is the plan. You want to talk about me being a guest? I need to come on more. I mean, you guys are so encouraging. I need to hear this every day, man. So it really means a lot. I say this. You don't need to be. I don't need to be validated. I know. I feel like I'm doing what God has called me to do. But it's always good to hear. Hey, you're doing a good job. Hey, you're reaching people. You're doing more than you think you are. You're doing better than you think you're doing. So these words that you guys keep saying to me, I'm learning to take compliments I'm learning. I'm not very good at it, but I'm learning. So I just want to say they mean a lot. They really mean a lot.
Well, that's awesome. And that makes us feel good too, man. So that should feel good on your end. It feels good to hear that. So, well, let's stay in touch. Let's tie a bow on it. And that was unbelievable. Cheers, boys.